Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm delighted to be presenting to such an accomplished group of pedagogues today to share some of what I've learned teaching remotely this year. Today, I'm going to invite you into an asynchronous discussion format I developed for LitHum when we were forced to go remote. I call it the Sandbox. Welcome inside. It seemed to me that LitHum faced several challenges in a remote format, not least of which was engaging those first years who take the core reluctantly and building some kind of group dynamic over Zoom. I thought that maybe an asynchronous assignment might help welcome students into the challenge of LitHum and create opportunities for them to engage with one another. So I had several goals as I developed my asynchronous assignment. First of all, I wanted to encourage student curiosity. I wanted them to follow the threads that interested them the most as we worked through these amazing works of literature. I wanted them to get to engage in creative forms of interpretation to show that there's no one right way to grapple with these texts. That also, again, opens these works to them. And finally, I wanted to replace Zoom time with opportunities for rich asynchronous learning, thinking that screen fatigue, Zoom fatigue is all too real this year. With these goals in mind, I designed a weekly discussion board activity on courseworks in which I invited students to try out a number of creative ways of engaging with the texts. It is required, but I grade their efforts on a completion basis, which reduces the pressure they feel about it. And here's what I tell them. This is a place for you to engage with our literature in a playful or experimental way. I've borrowed the term sandbox from the playground, but it's also from the world of tech and engineering, where the sandbox is a place to experiment with new ideas that may or may not work. In the sandbox, it's totally fine if your castle doesn't quite hold together. The important thing is trying to build it. I did provide some resources to help them get started. This is what that would look like on courseworks, but they didn't always use these. Sometimes they went out and found their own, which was great. It's not required that they engage with these specific resources. I also asked them to reflect on their creative process and to engage with two peers' posts. So these three components, the creative assignment, the reflection, and the engagement with peers, added up to a robust, interactive online environment. I sincerely looked forward to reading the Sandbox entries each week. I think in this case, student work will be more illustrative than any description I might provide of their activity. So with their permission, I'm now going to show you some glimpses of their efforts. In addition to standard online discussion post options, such as close reading a passage, some of the Sandbox options included investigating the historical background of a work. That's what William did here about ancient Greek theater. Or writing 10 tweets from the perspective of a character or an author. Joachim did that from Dido at Broken Heart 1. Some students chose to analyze an artifact from the period. Here's Nicole analyzing a cup just showing the death of Agamemnon when we were thinking about the Oresteia. Or a later work that depicts something from the work of literature at hand. This is a later painting of Alcibiades and Socrates by Vincent that Jasmine analyzed one week. Sometimes they made a meme. That's what Ruth did about the Odyssey. Or rewrote a work in the style of another work. So Christy rewrote part of the Aeneid in the style of Susan Laurie Parks. They could write original rap lyrics from one character's point of view. Tim wrote from the perspective of Hector. Or write song lyrics based on our work. That's what Riley did about Joseph from Genesis, and she also performed it for us. I want you to hear a little clip of her singing.
I have to admit life was a struggle for me. Mother and my father and my brothers were mean. Ended up in Egypt in slavery, 'cause God filled my dreams with prophecies. God was the only one with me.
So that's just a little sample, but she's so amazing. And I did just want to show you some of the sorts of ways they would respond to their peers. So especially since Riley's singing was so amazing here with her original lyrics, a number of peers, this is just a sample, responded, and you can see the sort of warm enthusiasm they had for each other's works, which I think was really great. I did ask my students for some reflections on the Sandbox, and several of them pointed to the cognitive benefits of returning to a work in a new way. Iris wrote, "The Sandbox has been a nice, structured place to ponder interesting elements to each piece we read. For me, it's also a way of thinking through writing. Oftentimes, I come away with new ideas after I finish a Sandbox piece." Similarly, Daniel said that he thinks that the creative options of the Sandbox create engagement because they actually do what we talk about a lot with LitHum. We say that the LitHum curriculum has enduring importance in part because it's influenced so many things that come after it. And here, the students get to actually experience the process of engaging with previous work to generate new work. At the end here, he says, students produce their own creative responses and see how their own interpretations of themes and stylistic choices reflect in their creation, even if it's not a Rembrandt and it's just a color pencil drawing. Christy also signals something that I think is really, really beneficial about the Sandbox, and maybe the thing that I think is most important. It really reduces the intimidation and stress of LitHum. So Christy writes, "I think the Sandbox is a great way to take risks without having to worry about how it will affect your grade. My favorite thing so far has been exploring the more artistic side of literature, drawing scenes, analyzing paintings, etc. I'm a STEM major, so it's a nice break to be able to share my thoughts on beautiful pieces of art and watch everything that we've read come together." So she's signaling that she feels welcomed into the literature by having these other options, but also that this provides a way for her to synthesize many things that we're doing. So there's both an intellectual benefit and an affective benefit. This is an adaptable assignment. If you don't feel like having an asynchronous component every single week is right for your course, that's absolutely fine. Bernadette Myers, who's one of the amazing LitHum preceptors, adapted it into a midterm and a final exercise. The students submitted both, but they got to choose one to showcase to their peers at the end of term. And Bernadette reported that that was really exciting for them. She moreover said, quote, "Students came up with some really incredibly creative interpretations of the text, and they were really emboldened, I think, to be more critical through their creative reinterpretations, as opposed to paper writing, where appreciation or intimidation could limit their analysis of the literature." Bernadette here is, again, signaling the lowering of the affective barrier that happens in the Sandbox. And I guess I'm using this term affective barrier. I come from a background in second language acquisition training. And in that field, the affective barrier between wanting to speak but feeling embarrassed to speak in a second language that you're in the process of acquiring is a major area of research. And so I've been thinking about that with LitHum because a lot of our students feel that their strengths lie in STEM fields and therefore feel a little intimidated by LitHum. Here, the Sandbox lets that intimidation dissipate in favor of being a little bit playful and creative. So in sum, being forced to be creative because of teaching remotely has led me to develop these assignments that I think are going to be portable beyond the age of Zoom. I feel like I wouldn't have leaned in so much into these creative assignments in another time. And yet I've seen so clearly how they have both intellectual and affective benefits for the students. And I can't see myself giving that up. I may follow Bernadette's lead and adapt them into midterm and final assignments rather than a weekly one. But regardless, I think that integrating creative work into LitHum is something I'll definitely be doing going forward. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.